everyone would please rise and take the flag for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our next order of business is to swear in Ms. Gaskins and Ms. Rosario. I'll just come up here and just right here. And you'll place your left hand on the Bible. I'm sorry.
She has two
Okay.
left hands.
Whoops. And repeat after me. I, Deanna Rosario,
I, Deanna Rosario,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution and laws of the United
the
States
Constitution and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
as a member of Hope Mills Board of Adjustment.
as a member of Hope Mills Board of Adjustment.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Sign that.
And I'm excited to.
This is for you.
Oh, thank you. I love pins.
You would place your left hand on the Bible and repeat after me.
Okay, I couldn't reach without standing.
I, Denise Gaskins,
I, Denise Gaskins,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of North Carolina,
of North Carolina,
not
can you hear me?
inconsistent therewith,
Yeah,
not
I can hear you.
inconsistent
Okay.
therewith,
and that I will
Question,
faithfully
do you
discharge
need me to
and I
give
will
you
faithfully
screen
discharge
sharing
the
capabilities
duties of
for the
my office
PowerPoint?
the duties of my office
as a member of Hope
But
Mills
do you,
Board
I
of
have it, I have printed it out for them,
So help me
so
God.
you don't have to put it on the screen if you don't need to.
Think of mine. Yeah, if you have it, then that's fine, that's probably easier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, just basically tell them what you're reading from as you go by, but they do have it in this,
Okay, what about these cards?
Let me get it
If
pulled
you'd
up.
like to
Yeah,
have
I'm sorry,
one,
y'all, I'm kind of
contact
computer
us.
issues, of course,
Just recently
hard
found
to cover,
a
but.
huge
Nah,
Supply.
supply of
Had
them
a
and
restart
they're
here.
years old, so.
James is,
Oh.
doing a quick swearing in.
Sure. What, let me see what they say. It doesn't say.
Okay.
All right, Dan, you up if you're ready?
Give me 1 second, my computer is restarting.
Okay.
I had to call it on my iPad here, so. If I can get it to work, I may actually rejoin in just a second on my computer.
Okay.
But let me hang out here until I make sure that's gonna work. How's everybody doing tonight? Sorry,
Hey.
have technical difficulties.
Good, good. I have one right here. Oh, thank you. I guess we're gonna take this.
Everything always picks the worst time to freeze up.
Murphy's Law.
That's right.
Can't go wrong with it.
Nice pens.
All right, I'm reloading this. All right, so I'm gonna call right back on my computer and I'll cut that out.
Yeah, just click back on, I'll let you in.
All right.
Even though it's slightly out of order, if we wanna go ahead and approve the agenda, then we can get that taken care of while he puts back in. So
good?
I'm trying to get presentation over now, but I have an issue with that. Y'all, I'm sorry for all the issues here. Had everything ready and then have to do it remotely. I was not prepared for it. 1 second. Jen, are you able to, have, so I mean,
Say that again?
be able to make it so I'm able to see the screen?
You want to share the screen?
I can see the screen.
You
I
can't,
can get my presentation out, so I'm having trouble getting it. If I can just see,
you can't see the screen from what you're looking at now?
the, not the screen of the presentation on it. Are we doing a training real quick?
Yeah, I'm just, I don't have anything on my screen other than just our two video.
Okay. Well, are we,
Everyone has a
board,
handout.
do y'all need a refresher on the standards here?
Ultimately, if they have the entire presentation printed out for them, so you can
All right,
just,
let me do that. Let me do that. Hang on 1 second. I changed my presentation.
and I have shared the screen, so if you click at the bottom where it says share screen, we should be able to see what you're looking at.
Okay. All right, I don't have it in front of me, but I can go from memory on.
Okay, well, they have it in front of them.
Okay. All right, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so, and I know it's been a long time, first of all, sorry that I'm remote, got COVID right now, so I couldn't be there in person, and then sorry for all the technological issues, my computer chose the worst possible time to freeze up. So as y'all know, we've met previously, but it's been quite a while since we've had a Board of Adjustment hearing. So just before we get started with the substantive case before us tonight, just a reminder on the rules and procedures for Boards of Adjustment. As y'all may recall, this is what is known as a quasi-judicial board. And what that means is this board is essentially sitting as like a judge would in court. You know, you're taking facts and applying legal standards to those facts and making a determination as to whether the applicant is entitled to the relief that they are looking for. There are several different things that can be involved in the Board of Adjustment process. What I believe is up tonight, chance of correct me if I'm wrong, is a special use permit.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'll focus our training for tonight on that. A special use permit is a permit for a particular land use that is allowed within the town of Hope Mills, but only by special use permit. So it's a use that you can do this, but only if the Board of Adjustment agrees that it is appropriate circumstances. And we'll get to the four sort of factors that you need to consider in a special use permit in just a second. But as far as how the meeting is run, so the chair of the meeting, and I understand we have to have a temporary chair. If we had the board vote to elect a temporary chair.
Not yet.
Okay. So in a few minutes, we'll need to do that to proceed, because current chairs seat expired, and we'll need to reappoint them, because everyone serves for 3-year terms, so we need to have a 5-member board. So in just a few minutes, you'll vote to have a temporary chairperson, and then that person will sort of run the meeting. And I'll be happy to assist with that. But the way it runs is you've got an applicant here, who's, I assume, present for the meeting, may be represented by counsel. Their burden is to come in and show you that they are entitled to a special use permit. As the Board of Adjustment, your job is to elicit the facts and testimony necessary to make a determination as to whether the 4 criteria for a special use permit are met. And if they are met, then you can grant, but then you should grant a special use permit. If they are not met, then you need to document which element is not met and why it is not met. Ultimately, it is the burden of the applicant to prove that they meet those 4 standards, but your role as a board member and the Board of Adjustment is to elicit the testimony necessary to make that determination. Or if there's questions about something that the applicant has presented or someone speaking in opposition to the special use permit presented, to ask those questions so that you have the knowledge base to make the decision. Now, everything that you use to make a decision in a quasi-judicial hearing has to come from the hearing itself. So anything that you may already know or may have heard about this project, you can put that out of your mind. I don't think that that's going to be an issue here. But you need to make your decision on whether the special use permit is granted or not only on the facts presented to you tonight that are part of the record in this case. The record in this case is what will be presented during the hearing, testimony, any documents that may be presented. I don't know that this will be an issue tonight, but certain testimony requires an expert opinion. For example, traffic impact, things that would be within the realm of something only an expert would have knowledge of. So effect on property values, traffic study analysis, those types of things. And as we get through the hearing, if any of that comes up, I'll flag that for you. And this probably requires expert testimony. And that just means, you can't consider lay testimony. Lay testimony is just someone coming in and saying, I think this is gonna affect my property value. You need someone who is familiar, who's in the field of real estate, that testifies that how it might affect property value, likewise with traffic study. So as we go through tonight, I'll make sure that we're staying within the bounds of the testimony that we are allowed to have at this hearing. And if anybody does have questions about a piece of testimony or evidence, the appropriateness of that, just let me know. And we'll make sure we proceed the right way. So, as I said, the issue tonight is a special use permit. The 4 criteria for special use permit, hang on one second.
And Dan, I have that at the back of my
Ready?
slide. You guys have this?
Yes.
Yeah, they have that in there as well. If you want to explain to them, that's fine.
Yeah, well, so Chancellor's put it in the packet, the 4 criteria that you need to meet, essentially that is in conformity with our land use plan, and not going to adversely affect, anybody else. Those 4 factors are our guiding principle for our hearing tonight. You need to find that all 4 of those are met in order to grant the permit. Are there any questions? No, I just gave a very brief overview of all this, and I know we've met before on that. I'm not gonna waste our time tonight on the other, like, variances and things like that, because that's not what's before us tonight.
Dan, what'll probably happen is, now that we've concluded the ethics training, they'll approve the agenda, elect officers, but when I do a quick presentation on the case, the slides that I provided for them, the 4 criterion for the special use is at the back of that, and there may be some discussion to make sure they clarify the specific particular criterion at that time. So I think the training that you just gave is sufficient, so we can discuss this later when we get to that decision.
That makes sense.
if they need more clarification.
Does any member of the board have any questions at this point on what we're doing tonight or how we're gonna go about doing it?
I do not.
No.
No, they said no.
No, there was one question.
Just one.
Hold on, we got one question. Hold on a second.
I'm sorry, I may be jumping ahead, but this whole special use permit is because the current zoning codes don't allow for daycare?
I'll
Is that
give you an
correct?
update
Or
on
is
that.
am I jumping ahead?
No.
Okay.
Perfect question. It's in the presentation I'm getting ready to give, and
Okay.
it'll make all the sense in the world.
Okay, all right.
All right, I think that's it, Dan. Jane, you want to move us through to the rest of the?
Do we have a volunteer for a vice chair?
Yeah.
Ms. Hamilton has volunteered to be the vice chair.
And I think what Jane is saying is, until you elect officers, Mrs. Hamilton would just preside over this meeting
Okay.
in the
So we don't have to
absence.
go through the motions and seconds for that one?
Well, technically, she just, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jane and Dan, Mrs. Hamilton would take us through item 3, which is approval of the agenda, the election of officers. Y'all did approve the
Yeah,
agenda?
we did that.
Okay, so we're at the election of the chair and vice chair. Ultimately, you make that decision, and whoever is chosen as the chair, they take over the rest, or do you just leave Ms. Hamilton to finish the
My
meeting?
suggestion is that tonight we elect a vice chair, and then once Ms. Craver is reseated, then we can hold the full election.
Okay,
For chair and vice chair.
so we just elect the vice chair tonight.
Yeah, that's, if Dan thinks that's appropriate.
Dan, did you catch that?
I, say that again, I like the chair, I like the vice chair.
Ultimately, Mrs. Hamilton has volunteered as vice chair, but with the issue of
Okay.
Mrs. Craver, I think Ms. Hamilton, we would ultimately let her preside over the rest of the meeting, but they're gonna nominate a vice chair tonight, and then I guess they wait until,
No, I'm saying Ms. Hamilton would be the vice chair, then at the next meeting, we can
Do the whole.
re-elect Ms.
okay, so
Craver
Ms.
as-
Hamilton is volunteered as vice chair, she preside over this meeting as vice chair, and then at the next particular Board of Adjustment meeting, we just have the election of the officers.
I think that works.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone
I'll
have
take a-
any comment?
Oh,
Have you-
no, just because I was gonna make a motion to nominate.
Okay, you moving to accept her nomination?
Yeah.
Okay.
Need a second.
I second that motion.
Moves and second, is seconded by Mrs. Gaston.
All in favor?
Uh,
All right. Unanimous?
All right.
All right. Cindy, you're in charge.
Oh, Lord, okay, no, it's good.
Yeah, now, next on the agenda is, the approval of the minutes.
We did that
Oh,
already.
y'all did that? All right, I guess next I'm up. The public hearing, I'm reading from this particular document now. And this is the official public hearing. This is for a Board of Adjustment case, and it's a request to consider a special use permit to allow a daycare facility in a RR rural residential / CZ conditional zoning district. This is case P 22-01-HM on August 29th, 2022. If you flip to the second page, just the background information. The applicant again is seeking a special use permit to open up a daycare facility inside of an existing recreational facility. If you recall, or if you're not sure, the TJ Robinson Life Center is open as a recreational facility. The site is 10.0 acres in size, but this is the key that's tied to Mrs. Gaston's previous question. The reason why there was a zoning case, ZNG-009-22, because this site is zoned RR/conditional zoning. And when she initially got the conditional zoning approval a couple years ago, she was specifically ironed into the uses that she submitted with the application at the time 2 years ago, and it was just generic uses. So when she wanted to actually add daycares as a use, because daycares was not listed in the list of uses she wanted under the initial conditional use approval. She had to go through the process again to add daycares in as a permitted use. She's here today because our zoning code says that the only way you can approve a daycare is by a special use permit. So the case that I'm referencing again, this ZNG 00922 that was approved on July 18th, was just our Board of Commissioners giving her the approval to have daycares as a permitted use on this conditional zoning, with them knowing that in order to approve the daycare, she would have to come through to you guys. So that's why she's here today, but that's why that reference case is in your staff report. Next page, it provides you with just the zoning of the property and surrounding zoning. You see the properties to the south are zone RR. The property directly adjacent to the subject property is developed with a religious facility. And so basically you have mainly almost 100% residential uses around this particular property. The next page, it outlines the Southwest plan. The Southwest plan calls for medium density residential and suburban residential. You'll find that to be useful when you get to the back page, because one of the last criterion speaks about the land use plan. That's the reason why I have that in here. The next couple of slides you see are just the site photographs. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to visit the site, but this is the existing facility. It's 50,000 square feet. And I want to make sure I point out whatever's going on at the facility right now as a recreation center, that's really not what you're considering. You're considering if a daycare center is suitable to be operated inside of it. She's not constructing anything on the outside. This will basically be a complete internal operation. And so I don't think you'll see anything different than what you see out there now. It just means that somewhere in that building, she's going to operate a daycare. Now, in full disclosure, she's also going through inspections to go through the proper process for permitting and things of that nature, but she has to get this approved first. If you go to the last sheet, what I have on here, this is directly out of general statute. In order to grant a special use permit, the Board of Adjustment must find the following, and I'll read them out into the record. A, that the use will not materially endanger public health or safety. Second, the use meets all required conditions and specifications. Third, the use will maintain or enhance the value of adjoining or abutting properties, or that the use is a public necessity. And finally, that the location and character of the use will be in harmony with the area where it is located and is in general conformity with the town's adopted land use plan. I put that on the previous slide to show you that it is in compliance with the land use plan, knowing that that was going to be mentioned in the fourth criterion. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I have in bold, a 4/5 vote is required to grant a variance, but all other actions by the Board of Adjustments are just requiring a majority vote. Is that correct?
That is correct. So tonight is just a simple majority vote.
Simple majority vote. So just to clarify, if this was a variance, they would have to get 4 out of 5 of you guys to vote approval. But because it's a special use permit, a simple majority would ultimately grant the approval. Dan, also just for clarification, does the applicant have to show support for all 4 criterion for a special use permit like a variance, or is it up to the discretion of the board?
Well, the board has to find that all 4 of those.
That's what I'm asking. So what I'm clarifying is all 4 of these criterion, you would have to find that she meets all 4 of these before we can ultimately grant that majority approval. That concludes my presentation in terms of the findings of fact. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you guys have for myself or the town clerk or the town attorney. That's it.
Is that it for the presentation?
Because that's why I said typically for quasi judicial, the only thing I can do is tell you the facts of the case. I can't give you an opinion about it. I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I typically would give a very lengthy recommendation, but because the decision of like Mr. Hartsock said, that your decision is based on just findings of facts and testimony. That's what you have to rely on. And what you're ultimately deciding is, if this facility, the way it exists now, do you think a daycare center is suitable on the inside? That's ultimately what their request is.
So I think he's asking if anybody has any questions on the 4 factors.
I do.
For the,
I mean, I don't see how C is met. A public necessity?
I think that's just a matter of, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, with a daycare center, I don't know if any daycare would be a public necessity per se. That's more of a, I guess, on your opinion.
And it doesn't, you know, if you look at the criteria, we're trying to see if it meets, whether it is a public necessity is not on the list. So, you know, we need to find that it won't endanger public health. We need to find that it's gonna maintain or enhance value of property around it. But it doesn't need to be, so we don't need to decide that, well, we need a daycare center, or we don't
I
need
think
a
that's what's
daycare
going
center.
on.
That's not really what, it is. Your job tonight is solely to determine if these 4 factors are met.
I have a question.
Shoot.
This proposed daycare, this is for school-age kids, before, after school, off-school daycare. It's not gonna be like infants and toddlers and.
From my understanding, it's school age kids. From my, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she might have it in her application.
So you mean just after school care and not like a full daycare from 0 to 12?
Hold on one second.
it has it here, it has before and after school.
It says before and after care for kids.
That's in this one, the
Oh.
agenda.
Yeah, it's in the
Page
page
3.
3 of the application. It does say pretty much full daycare, but it does say it for. It doesn't say school age or infants. It just says for kids.
Yeah, the applicant may be able to provide clarity on that.
Yeah, she's not present. I would say if it says school before or after school, I would probably consider that school age, but
And what about summer programs? Very referenced when school is out, when they provide.
she has summer camp in here.
Before, after
They
school.
already do that.
Yeah, and I think they already doing that. So
So this
I-
is basically just an expansion of what they already do as a recreation center.
I wouldn't say just an expansion because the state, based on what she's moving with, will be an approved daycare with the state. So
Okay.
some of the activities that she does with kids may be increased, but for what she's asking for this evening, there is going to be an officially state approved daycare operation. I do think that some of the services that a child participates in daycare may be similar to what typical summer camp activities are, but I wouldn't call it an extension of summer camp. It appears that there are some activities she's gonna be doing with kids that do fall under the strict specific requirements of what the state regulates as a
Okay.
daycare.
Do we know, had any of the neighbors had any objections?
No, based on the general statute, we did send notices out to all adjacent property owners. And I wanna make sure I'm clear as well. This has been, discussed for about 3 months, because if you recall, she had a 2-month process from the zoning, which was, planning board and board of commissioners, where at that public hearing, it was notified that she's pursuing this zoning action because she wants to add a daycare. So I will say that not only was this particular special use permit hearing advertised, that sign has probably been up on that property advertising the 2-month period of rezonings as well. And so if you looked at our zoning signs, we're trying to get a little snazzy with technology. Our zoning signs have QR codes on them now. So I don't have to go get the zoning case printed on every sign. You take your camera and you point it at the sign, it runs it straight to a public hearing, pending public hearing agenda item. So the public agenda item for the rezoning case has been pretty much on our website since probably June. and that's the case that listed she's pursuing a daycare center here. This is the approval of the daycare center. So I would surmise that the general public, at least in the surrounding neighborhood, because we had to send notices out to adjacent properties for the rezoning case and this particular case. To answer your question, I would surmise that, in my opinion, they probably are aware. I haven't received any phone calls in any opposition, but at least I can say that signed notifications, letters, and on our website, it has been up for quite some time.
At least 2 months.
This will be the third month, because
This will be the third
the approval of the rezoning was on July 8th. And then we had to wait a while to get a date to actually be within your schedule as well. So I would say since June has been the time that we were probably advertising. Probably earlier than that, because the Town of Hope Mills Board of Commissioners approval was in July 18th. The planning board approval was the month prior to that.
Most daycares have outside facilities for the children. Is that already there?
Our ordinance only says that if you have a playground, it has to be enclosed with a fence. It does not require a playground. We haven't gotten any indication from Mrs. Robinson that she's doing anything on the exterior of the site. The site plan that she submitted an application is the same site plan that she used. So that's why I said, from what has been presented to staff, this appears to be an internal operation. If you've ever visited the site, there's a lot of activities inside the building, and so I'm not sure if that factored into why she's not going to have a playground, but she does not have one submitted with the site plan that gives us the impression that there's any activity that's going to take place outdoors.
So do we discuss it amongst us, or does
No,
somebody make a
that'll come a
motion?
little bit
I think you
later.
discuss if you got any question for us, or you got a question for each other, and then I guess somebody makes a motion at some point.
Is there anyone here that's gonna present their case?
And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the applicant has to be present. It's
So if
useful.
the applicant doesn't want to present testimony, that's fine. Then you just make your decision based on the documents that are in the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's nobody here that will speak against or for this
That,
then? Doesn't look
basically,
like
there's
it.
nobody here in support or in opposition,
Okay.
which is typical with public hearings. But if there are questions that you specifically have for her that's not in the documents you have for the record, that would be a challenge. But
Okay.
as of right
Then-
now,
Then, if that is the case, if you do have questions that aren't answered by the evidence currently in the record, and you need testimony from the applicant or someone else in order to make your decision, then we would have to probably, reconvene
yeah, defer.
and ask that the applicant be present.
Yeah, so that's a deferral. If you feel that there's an answer that you need that is gonna determine the vote, yes or no, then I think what he's saying is you could possibly postpone or defer the case so that she can answer your question directly. Or if you feel that the documents and the information that you have this evening is sufficient enough for you to make that evaluation or that determination, then you proceed accordingly.
So I
But
do
that's-
have some questions. How close is the nearest residential, the nearest housing? Is there a,
like a distance
like,
requirement.
yeah, a neighborhood close to the building, or is it out there where there's nobody around it?
I will say, if I'm on the building side of Blacks Bridge, there's a church. If I'm facing the building, there's a church on the left-hand side. There are 2 single-family houses on the right-hand side, and then across the street there's a whole neighborhood.
Okay.
So I think the neighborhood is called Black Bridge Village, and I think Steeplechase is on the back side of that across the street.
I've been out
But right beside it, there's a pretty large church on one side, and I wouldn't call it a heavily wooded area. It's not a neighborhood on the other side, but there are 2 houses on that side. I would say most of the residential development that you see is probably across the street. I wouldn't say there's a significant amount of residential development within the close confines on the same side of the street as the property.
Okay, this says that it will operate from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening. So I'm just asking these questions because of maybe a noise issue. If they're gonna have recreational activities, you're adding an additional however many children that are gonna be there. So is this gonna create a noise issue with the neighbors? That's kinda where I'm going with that.
Not just noise, traffic.
Yeah.
Transportation from
Right,
school
and-
to the daycare.
And people lining up on the street. I mean, I see that the parking lot is extremely large. But if you got a lot of recreational activities going on, you got people coming and going,
Pick up at
picking up
6.
kids. So that could become an issue.
I would say, and I'm not the advocate, but just surmising what has been presented to me, I would say that I think the building is sufficient enough to handle the operation internally. She hasn't indicated to me what the number of kids are. I didn't get an indication where it's a considerably large number of people. Typically, what we look for is the parking. And the parking calculation is one space for, I think, 3. Hold on 1 second. Parking calculation is 2 parking spaces plus 1 off-street parking space for each employee. And so, I think it's more of a judgment call. We don't have any information that tells us how many children that she's targeting to deal with during the day. So I do think that's a valid question. I guess your question would be, do you think that the daycare center operation at the same time as the recreation facility operation will push this facility to the point where it wouldn't have adequate parking
Right.
from what you have now? That's the question that you ultimately have to determine. But I don't see anything in my application on what has been submitted to us.
Yeah, it would help to know, if they have half of the building dedicated for childcare or one big room dedicated for childcare, or however they're gonna do that. So that would give them as well as us an approximate idea of how many people are gonna be in that facility at any.
I will say,
Specific
if
time.
that is a question, I will say from my conversations with the chief building inspector, because right now, she's having to deal with them, because no matter where you put this in the building, you're gonna have fire exit issues and things that you may have to alter the building to do.
Yep.
And so from my conversations and meetings with them and the applicant and the chief building inspector, it appears that a small room or a small section of the interior piece would be used. It does not appear to me to sound like half of the entire facility would be utilized. It sounds like she's trying to find a small area or room within the existing portion that she would have to alter to still meet the building code, but that's what it appears to be centered towards. That still doesn't tell me the number of kids,
Yeah.
but it does indicate to me that it appears that she's wanting to utilize a small portion of the building, not the entire facility.
I do have a question for that playground. If she wants that playground, will she have to come back and do this again?
No, the
No.
playground simply says in our code, if you do have a playground, it just gives parameters on the construction of that playground. So if you go back to the far end, and I'm just telling you why I don't think that she's gonna have one. If you go to the far end of that site, that's the only portion of that site that's not paved. The entire front and left, right side of the entire facility is paved. The other side of it is adjacent property. So if I were just looking at analyzing the site, I would say the rear would probably be the only area that she could put something. The reason why I don't think that's practical is because that's the rear entrance on exit to the biggest gym that they have. So you'd be running a playground out of the gym. The way the code reads, the playground has to be accessible from an interior classroom. So I don't think that portion of the building would be sufficient for a playground either. That may be why she's not proposing one. If she does propose a daycare, she wouldn't have to propose a playground. She wouldn't have to come back to you guys to get the approval of the playground. she gonna have to meet the building code on where she's putting it and the accessibility to it. So she still has to meet the building code, but the playground wouldn't have to come back to you guys for approval. I just think based on me looking at the building, looking at the site and the layout of the building, I don't see where she could put one outside. If she does do one, she has to meet the building code in order to.
That street, is it a two-way street?
Black Bridge?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and is she gonna have someone, or do you know if she's gonna have someone out there to direct traffic control once pickup starts at 6? Because, and I'm trying to picture it, but having that traffic backed up so the parents can come in and pick up the kids, is someone gonna be there controlling that traffic?
I would say, in terms of, it's two different levels to that answer. When DOT approves a facility of this magnitude, they require what we call a deceleration lane. If it gets much bigger, they're going to require stoplights and things of that nature. So DOT did require the installation of a deceleration lane for this facility. And what that is if you have traffic coming this way and traffic coming this way on Blackbridge Road and cars start to back up, there's a separate dedicated lane that you can pull into that just gives only access to this site. So that's the answer to the car stacking up on Blackbridge. If we're talking about dropping off directly in front of the building, because of the topography, if you go to the site, it's very steep sloping topography. So I would surmise that the drop-off area is probably gonna be well off of Blackbridge, because you're gonna probably have to turn into the site and drive a pretty considerable distance to get to the building. And that's probably where I would surmise that you're gonna have kids being dropped off. I don't
You're not
anticipate.
sure on that.
I don't see how you would do it in Blackbridge, because at least I wouldn't. I don't anticipate, if you go to the site, I don't see how anybody realistically would want to drop off on Blackbridge because of the way the site is set up. You would have to turn onto the property and drive around through the property to get to the building. That's what I would surmise would probably be your safest location to drop
And
kids off.
this would be Monday through Friday?
Yes, from my understanding.
The site photo, the view of it, it looks like there might be multiple entrances into the parking lot.
The only entrance to the parking lot is there are different access points around the parking lot, but there's only one entrance to the parking lot off of Blackbridge Road. So there's areas where if you turn in off of the street, you can kind of keep straight to a parking area where they have bus parking, and then you can make a left to go, because it's almost like a detention pond in the middle of the site that you can go around, but there's only one entrance to and from the property of Blackbridge.
And Blacksbridge right now is still just 2 lanes. There's not a
Yes.
turning lane.
It's 2 lanes in one direction, and then there's a dedicated deceleration lane that was put in as required by DOT.
Since this building's been erected?
Yes.
Okay, I haven't been down there in a while.
Yeah.
And not much farther from there, are they doing work for 295?
295. They've changed the area tremendously. They got 3 roundabouts further down. 295 is dumping out there. But the reason why I say DOT comes into play, when DOT was doing the evaluation of the recreation center in general, because it's 50,000 square feet, because there's concern with traffic, that's where there's certain thresholds with DOT that are triggered based on the magnitude of a development. The lowest threshold is your deceleration lane. The next threshold is a traffic impact study. The next threshold above that is you're probably having to put in stoplights and things of that nature. And so they determine what that threshold is, and sometimes they see a development that doesn't require anything. So for this development, the approval by DOT did require a deceleration lane.
And that's all kind of been resolved with
Yes.
Just jump in here to say,
Yeah, they had to have that installed before they could get it approved from.
traffic impact is one of those things that does require expert testimony to these things. So if you believe that is necessary,
That's a good point.
that might be something that, you know, we need to reconvene on. But as Chancellor said, it may or may not be an issue depending on what the DOT says. But,
Well, I would make the
you can't
assumption.
consider an impact on traffic without having some study in the record,
Well, one of the reasons that I asked about
or expert testimony.
the size of the childcare operation is, that would depend on how many children, would depend on how many people are coming to drop off and pick up.
Yeah.
Because they've already got recreation and everything in there, so if it's only maybe 10 or 12 kids, I don't think it would make that much of a difference in the traffic, so that's kind of why I was asking.
That's a very good point, because if
Yeah.
we're talking 10 kids versus
Versus-
a couple hundred,
Right.
that's a completely
Exactly.
different
So
conversation.
like I said,
Um,
if they've already got recreation and all kinds of other stuff going on, you're still gonna have a lot of traffic. So 5 or 10 cars, to me, isn't gonna make that big of a difference.
And again, we don't have a number of kids. The only thing I can
Right.
tell you is the conversations that we're having. You got to understand the magnitude of it. They're having this conversation after we've given the building a CO. We've already approved everything in the building for the recreation facility. So when she's coming back, she knows that in order to open this facility, she has to do some changes to the building to meet the building code, to meet the state requirements of what any daycare would be.
Right.
And under those conversations, it doesn't appear that she's saying she's taking half of a 50,000 square foot facility for kids. She's trying to find a small portion in that building to retrofit that in. That still doesn't give me the number of kids, but it kind of does tell me that this doesn't anticipate, from my standpoint, to being a very large operation.
But we don't know.
I'm gonna excuse me.
I said, but we don't know.
No, we don't.
Yeah. So without knowing the number of kids, we don't know if she's gonna have enough staff to deal with all the kids and the traffic and all the logistics that go with it.
That's a valid question.
But I think that comes in, that falls in line with your state regulations on
Yeah,
how many
that's not us.
people, that really doesn't have anything to do with us, because that is by the state, how many you have, the qualifications of each person.
They do have a
all
very
of that.
strict set of regulations.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it, with that
And that's
part
why I
of it.
said I do know this is a fully functional daycare center, because
Okay.
we did talk to the state in terms of what their requirements were.
It's very strict, yeah.
Yeah, it's very strict. And so that still doesn't answer the question on number of kids, but
Right.
I think with employees,
Right.
a lot of those things are regulated.
And
Okay.
then
It's
does
just
she
that-
plan to expand to where she's gonna be third shift, opening on weekends? Cause then you gotta consider the church traffic.
I'm not sure.
Would that be another special use hearing?
Would that be another hearing if she wanted to do that, or she would just increase with the state?
We don't approve the hours of operation. If
Yeah,
what we're
that's what
approving
they
here
say.
is the daycare. Now, when you say third shift, what would a third shift daycare operate as? I'm not sure.
Midnight?
Overnights.
Yeah, they keep the kids overnight.
Yeah,
So
nah.
11 to 7.
What
they're
she
saying
ultimately
6 to
said
6.
here in her application was 6 a.m. to 6
Yeah,
p.m.
but I'm thinking is later on, is she planning on expanding? And then I was thinking about traffic, especially if she expanded on Sundays with the church there.
Dan, would you consider, if their application says a daycare center from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., would expanding that to being 24 hours overnight, would that constitute a different type of approval that's not granted here?
So what's the question? So their application is to run daycare from 6 to 6.
Yes, and there's a question is if they wanted to expand it to third shift overnight, would that require them to come back to the Board of Adjustment?
And do special use permit.
That's a
It's
different
probably,
question. I hadn't heard that.
it's a materially different, I mean, it's still a daycare, but, well.
Could they, do they?
For
It's all
our
hypothetical,
purposes
good question.
today, I think we consider they're gonna be running it from 6 to 6, and then if they wanna change it down the road, then, we'll figure out what avenues they have to do that. But for today, they're running it from 6 to 6.
And I do know in the general statute, they can put conditions.
Can.
Maybe that could be a condition that it operates under what the application indicated it would be. That would lock them in, I'm not sure.
Conditions that you impose on a special use permit can only be permitted to the extent that, if one of these conditions, if the condition is added, then it helps meet the criteria. So if they meet all the criteria, you can't just start adding
Oh, okay.
conditions.
That's a little different.
Willy-nilly. It has to be, you know, if they ran it from 6 to 6, then it would then be fine, it would not materially endanger the public health. You know, that kind of thing. So any condition you put on it has to be geared towards assisting them to meet one of these 4 criteria. In other words, they would meet the 4 criteria if they added this special condition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, do y'all understand what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is anything a financial cost to Hope Mills?
Meaning, what?
I mean, as far as taxpayers, any of this would be a financial cost, or it's just solely on the facility?
Yeah, I don't think our tax.
No, it says
receipt
here,
would increase.
no fiscal impact.
Okay.
Here.
That wouldn't be a factor.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be a factor. I mean, I do economic development as well, so any new establishment, especially of this magnitude, there are benefits from it, but I don't think this particular use would swing it one way or the other in terms of the tax base.
And I see they're also wanting to do bingo. Is bingo generally in the evenings? Isn't it normally in the evening hours?
Bingo on there, I wouldn't consider bingo to be a part of daycare. I mean, I think she probably can do that now.
Okay.
At the recreation center, because I think she does pickleball and stuff like that.
Okay.
She has programs for seniors, but I wouldn't, if she put it in there, I wouldn't consider, my daughter's 6. I mean, my daughter's I'm not sure.
I just be thinking about
Pretty
traffic.
savage 6-year-old
Yeah.
playing bingo.
Well, they could probably maybe adjust their hour later, and that's not something we do, that's something they would wanna do, if they got complaints or something, that's just my thought. If, you know, if somebody called about complaints about noise or traffic, then they could, you know, maybe adjust it on their own with their hours or how they do things, so, that's just my opinion. Cause we can't control the hours or anything that they do out there, it's just.
I don't have any more questions.
Same.
There's no, any more questions from anybody?
No.
Not satisfied? Okay, so.
And wait, I'm sorry, I do have one more question. The church that's
Jason.
adjacent,
Yeah.
do they have a daycare?
No, not to my knowledge. I do know they have talked to the facility about overflow parking being allowed at the church.
Oh.
You can do certain things like shared parking agreements and things of that nature. I do know they had conversations,
Oh, that's nice.
but I do know that I know the pastor. I won't say how, but I do know the pastor, but I don't think he has a daycare at the church.
Okay.
Other than like during the service. type thing.
Some of them do, yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, like some churches
They
have
have
overflow
it
for
in
kids during
Yeah.
service, but I don't
Well,
think
Sunday
because they would have to go
has-
through the special use
I don't
permit
know.
process
But
as
that's
well.
something that,
Any daycare center has to go through the special use permit process. I'm not aware, and now if it was one approved at the church before I came along, I'm not aware of one being there. I do know, like I said, they've had conversations about the utilization of the church parking lot. A lot of times when you have requests for shared parking, we consider the character and use of the building. So let's say that the time that my building would be occupied is during the week and your building is adjacent and you work during the week as well, we're gonna be there at the same time. So you're not giving me parking that's you're giving me parking that's taken away from your parking calculation. But if I'm operating Monday through Saturday and you're a church and you're only operating on Sunday, typically those uses would not be in conflict with each other. Those are two uses that do work well with shared parking agreements. She doesn't have one with them. I do know that they've had conversations.
if there's not any more questions, then we have a motion to close the public hearing, and then we'll have discussion and vote on the approve or disapproval.
I'll make a motion to close the public meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so you guys wanna discuss it? And then we can vote, give some opinions.
She's not on there. Yeah, she can't yet.
I'm still stuck on number 6. See,
Oh, because this,
I mean, how is it going to enhance?
Well, I don't think
useful.
it's gonna detract from the value of the adjoining properties, cause they already use it as a.
Right, they're
parcel.
already out there doing stuff, and it's
So
just an
what's-
addition to,
And it's an and or type thing. So.
they're just adding,
I don't see
Sure.
and, I just,
Or, see,
I mean, if our criteria is that it meets all these,
yeah.
all four of these.
Yeah, speaking to the mic so we can capture it
Oh.
for the record.
sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
I
sorry.
thought we were
on?
close.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was on.
Should recognize the speaker.
Okay.
All right, you're recognized down there.
So just getting back to letter C, and from what I understand, we've got to, based on A, B, C, D, that it meets all these requirements, and I don't see how we can determine whether it's gonna maintain or enhance the value. And I don't see how we could say it's a public necessity. I mean, I don't know if there's other daycares out there. There is a lot of residential area, and I'm sure there's parents out there that would appreciate a daycare for their younger children. So, I don't know, I'm just stuck on that. But other than that, I think I would be good with everything.
Okay. Next.
I'm inclined to go ahead and permit it.
Okay. As
But
far as
it's
the
a discussion.
enhancement goes, my opinion is that, you know, the building's already there. So it's already either enhanced or it's not, and I think that it is. It's a huge building, it's a nice building. You know, they do a lot, they really do a lot for their children out there. This is just my opinion, I'm not trying to influence anybody. But I think that it does enhance.
Did y'all have a question?
No, but that's just my opinion on that part of it. And he already discussed the public necessity thing with that. I just kind of feel that it does. The only thing that I see is an issue is the number of children that are going to be there. But they can always work around that, I think. And like I said, if there are issues with noise or issues with traffic, they may be able to adjust their hours so that it's not during the peak traffic time, people coming in and out to work. And if there are noise issues, then if someone complains about it, they can always address that issue. That's just my opinion. So
And they definitely have plenty of parking.
yeah, they do. I saw that that's a lot of parking out there. But like I said, that's why I was asking about how many children, so I have an idea of how many people would be there to pick up and drop off. And like Mr. McLaughlin said, it's not safe to drop kids off on Blackbridge Road.
Yeah.
You got to pull in there and get your kids and stuff. So I don't see how that would actually block traffic in that area. Again, my opinion only. So
And once again, we don't have any information in the record on traffic impact, so. we
Okay.
really- We either can't, if you need that information to make a decision, then the most appropriate thing to do would be, request the applicant provide that, or someone provide that, but I don't think we can say one way or the other without expert testimony what traffic impact may or may not be.
The fact that DOT
If
has
that-
allowed it, that's enough for me. I don't need an expert opinion.
I don't either. And from what I've seen, just my experience in town, most of your traffic is when you get into town, up there around the fire department area where they're gonna put the roundabout in. And that's kind of my experience, where it's always a little bottleneck there. But other than that, it's kind of smooth sailing out through that area. I haven't been out in a while, but that's just what I've observed out in that area. So if there are no more questions, do I have a motion to approve?
Let me stop you, Ms. Hamilton.
sir.
Dan, do you need them to go through each criterion, or can they approve all four as a slate? Do you need them to go through and speak it into the record?
If you approve all four, I think you can do it in one go. If you're going to deny one of them, then I think you need to be specific about why you're denying
But they would need to read all four in the language.
it. Yeah, well, you need to find that all four exist.
That's what I'm getting at. So I don't think you can, and Dan, correct me, I don't think it's so simple as saying, let's get a motion to approve. You would have to state that I am recommending approval that it,
This is what you're saying.
So we'd have to read out
well, you would
all.
li- yeah.
Okay.
So in the motion, you would just have to say you feel that it meets this, and you feel that the second one, and you feel. the third one.
Can I do it, okay, I'd like to make the motion, for case number P 22-01-HM, to grant the special use permit. The first one is use will not materially endanger public health or safety. Use meets all required conditions and specifications. Use will maintain or enhance the value of adjoining or abutting properties, or that the use is a public necessity. Location and character of use will be in harmony with the area where it is located and is in general conformity with the town's adopted land use plan.
Now, is that your motion?
Right, that's my
Then you
motion.
would need a second on
I'll
that.
Right.
second.
Okay,
All
so
right.
motion is approved.
Properly seconded, then you gotta vote.
All in favor?
Oh, okay.
All in favor?
All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Approval is granted.
All right.
I just forgot the vote part, jeez.
All right.
The important part.
That will conclude the meeting, Dan.
Okay, I
if
make a
you-
motion to adjourn the public hearing.
A second.
Are you done, Mr.
Yeah,
Moore?
I'm done if y'all done.
Okay.
Dan, I'll give you a call if I need anything, but that'll conclude the hearing.